Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Noxcast, an Equinox news recap podcast. I'm your host, Charlotte King. I'm the managing executive editor of the Equinox.
And I'm Nathan Hope. I'm the administrative executive editor of the Equinox. And this week we are joined by our multimedia director, Jakob.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on. It's another instance where we get to have somebody on who I always mention in the credits. Jakob has been editing Noxcast for quite some time now, but I figured I would also give you the opportunity to just tell people sort of what you do in general as the multimedia director.
Well, as the multimedia director, I do have a few responsibilities outside of Noxcast. Of course, there is Noxcast editing these videos, cutting out parts that we mess up on our words, putting titles and music at the both beginning and ends. Then there's always the part where I take a moment from those videos and I cut them down into a reel, put subtitles over that, make sure it's formatted to the vertical phone layout. That's really more when it comes to Noxcast work, where most of the work goes in, because I care a lot about having those reels be short and getting all the important information out in under a minute. Aside from that, too, I also will do like the occasional, or I try to do the weekly just story on something that we have listed in our top stories or student life or A&E, something that's going on campus that I can see that as a video will make some type of entertaining content. And so that usually involves like getting B-roll of whatever event that is, then interviewing a few people there, cutting that all together to try and make some nice like documentary style format video.
Yeah. And so just in general, like Jacob's kind of our point person when it comes to video and audio stuff. And you know, you're a film student, and so it kind of makes sense, fits into sort of the space that you're working in. But no, it's been really cool, I think, because you know, Nate and I started Noxcast at towards the beginning of this school year, and we didn't really like 100% know where we were going to take it. We knew that we wanted to do some type of just like newsy like roundup every week to kind of give people an idea, you know, an overview of what we're talking about in the paper that week. But I think that over time, like, it's been really helpful to have Jakob around to help us kind of like refine how this works. And especially with the reels, I've been very grateful to have, you know, those end up really just like punchy. And I think it really gets to like a particular point that we stress in the episode. Like, for example, you know, we even did one recently, I don't remember if it was like 2 episodes ago or whatever, but where basically, you know, the moral civic engagement that we're always talking about, we finally made like a standalone reel about that. And so I think that was like a really cool example of being able to take something that like isn't necessarily like, we didn't do a story that was just about the concept of civic engagement. That's something that's unique to the podcast. But through the creation of that reel, we were able to put that out as like a standalone piece of content to kind of put that in front of people and like represent the organization that way.
Yeah, and then also like a lot of the times, Noxcast serves as a platform to like highlight a lot of other people that we work with, particularly on the e-board, that, you know, a lot of times we'll be like behind the scenes putting out all this great work, and we kind of get to have them, you know, show their face and talk about what they do. And you know, people can meet those who, you know, make this thing possible on a weekly basis. So I think it's great. And I think the reels in particular often highlight, you know, people in their jobs and what they like about it and sort of the things that they've worked on that they're proud of. So I've been really happy with it, and I've been really happy with you know, the reels that you've been able to pick out and edit. I think you've done really good with that.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't really have much more else to add other than that. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. One quick announcement, and then I'll turn it back over to Jakob because I want to talk about the video that you worked on most recently. But actually related to one of the most recent Noxcast reels we put out was about the editorial that we did related to the Student Assembly's legislation regarding stipends for student organization e-boards. We've had some just kind of updates and progress on that that I wanted to put out there. So we did have our meeting with the budget committee, but the issue of stipends didn't really come up as an issue. And we didn't want to press too hard on it, but so we went line by line. We sort of just presented our case as far as the budget goes. But so we've heard kind of through the grapevine that the next student assembly meeting, which will be Tuesday, I wish I had the date in my mind, Tuesday, April 8th at 6:30 p.m. I believe it'll be in the Mountain View room. And that will be the meeting where they vote on every student org budget for the upcoming year. So that includes us, that includes the other like 40 something student orgs on campus. We're hoping to basically have just as big of a presence as possible, to just be there, kind of say our piece and show that, we as a community really value the work that ourselves and our fellow student orgs who receive stipends do. And I would encourage for anybody else on campus who sees this and feels like they care about that cause as well, to come through and support us. It would mean a lot just to have that sort of backing, if you believe in the power of a strong student press or the work that Film Society, WKNH, or the Social Activities Council do every day to make this campus a just greater, stronger community.
And thank you to everyone thus far who's shown support to us in a variety of ways. It's been an incredible thing to see and hear, and really be uplifted by the community, by fellow student leaders, by faculty and alum. I think it's been a great time hearing from people. I wish it was on better terms that we can connect with some of these people, but regardless, I think we couldn't have even started this without the support of others. I mean, we always work on things and try to do the most that we can do just on an individual level, but with things like this, it really takes a village to sort of show that it's not just about us. And so please come on Tuesday if you care about what we've been talking about, and invite others as well. Anybody who might feel strongly about this issue, because student involvement is one of the biggest aspects of campus, and there's so many students who work day in and day out to make sure that students have these opportunities available to them. And I think, the campus would be nothing without some of these student leaders.
Definitely. It's really warmed my heart, again, even through these difficult circumstances, to read through just the outpouring of support from people across kind of every aspect of our community. And it means so much to me because the Equinox means so much to me. Student involvement as a whole means so much to me, to be able to connect with this community of amazing, intelligent, passionate, just great people who want to foster a space where great things can happen from week to week, whether it's events or pursuit of the arts or whatever. So thank you, and maybe we'll see you on Tuesday.
Yeah, no, I really don't have much. I just want to say, I agree with everything you guys said about how important student involvement is on campus. I think it's one of the highlights of Keene State. I think the Equinox is one of the highlights of Keene State. When I was on my initial tour of the school, I was able to see the Equinox office for the first time, and I just saw all the old papers on the walls, all the boards with everything on them. It just seemed like there was a group of passionate people working here, and I was like, I have to be a part of this somehow when I go here.
I mean, I had a similar experience of seeing sort of the spaces that the Equinox was working in and saying like, wow, I didn't know you could do that, basically. All right, with that, I'll toss it back over to Jacob to talk about your most recent video coverage for us and sort of what the process was with that, but also just kind of how it went.
Yeah. So for this one, I'd argue this was one of out of the videos that I've done. Unfortunately, this one kind of turned out to be a little smaller scale than some of the other ones, or at least what I was hoping initially. But on campus, there was this series of events relating to like Guatemalan culture and like really just trying to make students more aware of Guatemalan culture. I talked to like a couple people in the faculty that were a part of arranging this event, and they talked about how people can often like just think like, oh, there's food. Like, what was specifically interesting about the event was the one that I went to was they had the food truck on campus right outside the Media Arts Center, and they were delivering like specifically Guatemalan food, and they were making an effort to show that this was Guatemalan food and how much different it was from other South American countries. And they were talking about how a lot of the time students can kind of just put that all of the food from places south of Texas into one category, but no, there's so much diversity and difference in cultures between those countries.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's definitely something we witness, whether it's like in terms of the restaurants that are available in an area or just any popular conception. Like I definitely think there's a tendency where if you're not a part of like this sort of whole just range of cultures, you lump them together. It's like that concept of like ethnocentrism that I think we can all find ourselves being guilty of at times. But yeah, I think it's super cool to just sort of highlight a particular culture and try to lift up like the understanding of what that actually is and what it means to the people who are a part of it. And so I also think just, it's always interesting to me how much culture is associated with food. And I think that my theory is that really comes down to the fact that food is so accessible. It's a way to kind of entice people to want to learn about a culture because,
People are hungry.
yeah, if they're giving away snacks or whatever, like you're gonna want to be there. But then there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with wanting to go check out the grub and with that, hopefully you kind of gain that greater understanding. But so yeah, no, I think this is a cool event. I know you're still sort of putting the final touches on the video, but I'm super excited to see it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think food is definitely like a unifying thing that can bring attention to certain cultures, and it kind of reminds me of like the story that I heard about how back in the day, like the Thailand government paid people to go to the U.S. specifically like on grant money to start Thai restaurants in America because they wanted Americans to have like a positive perception of them through the use of their food. So I think, there's a lot of like diplomacy almost and like, getting the word out about certain countries that not a lot of people might know about, or if they do know about it, they might have like some sort of skewed opinion. So I think it really helps, bring down to earth that, we're all people on in this world, and we're sort of, have different things to offer. I was also going to ask, sort of, with the video, it is slightly different than print in that you're always trying to get, a sort of capture like the tone and like the sort of like of certain events. So I wanted to ask sort of what questions you generally ask when you're doing like a video on like an event or something in particular.
Well, yeah. Normally, when I go to an event, it really depends on who I'm interviewing. Oftentimes, normally you'll get a more full answer for somebody in faculty, but I usually ask a lot of similar questions about how this event contributes to campus, how it impacts students. But really, I think going back to what you said about tone, when I first interviewed for the multimedia position, I'm a film major, but what was brought up was the fact that doing work for the Equinox isn't like making a movie. You are still telling a narrative, but you are this. It has to be truthful. It has to carry the full story. I can't like cherry pick what I want to show and what I don't want to show. But I still think that there's a one heavy part of it is still caring about tone, caring about narrative, and that all comes down to like which pieces of B-roll I choose to put over which piece of footage, and just really how that all comes together to get a certain emotion.
Yeah, I think that's one of the interesting things with something like journalistic style of video, or like, I think you would see a lot of the same thing in like documentary filmmaking, where the interviews are kind of going to be what they are, but the B-roll is, as much as it can sometimes be overlooked, that's where the creative aspect of it can really lend a lot to the final product, because understanding the dimensions that you're working with there can really add a lot of dimensions to your story, narratively, because you're able to access another part of people's senses than you are when they're reading a written piece. It really communicates something so much just different, and on like a different level. And I think that's what's so interesting and so vital about our ability to continue to provide, video coverage, digital coverage of things. Even in some instances, like Jacob mentioned, sometimes we'll look to what's going on in student life or arts and entertainment for ideas on what could make for good video coverage. And so it's like we'll have both a video and a print article about the same event sometimes, but those two versions of that story are telling it differently. And that's where the value comes in for both, is the ability to more fully understand the story, the core of the story. And I would say, I think that element of understanding the dimension that B-roll can add is something that you in particular have a knack for. And I've noticed the way in which like the narrative and visuals kind of fuse together to make a really nice final product.
Thank you. Yeah, there are. I care a lot. I think fortunately, when it is mostly interviews telling your story, I care a lot about like myself being out of these videos when it comes to like reporting on stories. I don't want to be an active participant in it because I'm not part of these stories. These people are part of these stories, and so if you're just watching a shot of them talking for like 2 minutes at the camera, that can get a little boring. So really, a lot of B-roll is also just trying to keep who is ever watching the video to stay entertained, and like caring about, oh, this person's framed in the left side of the screen. That means that their eyes are going to be looking over at their face, which means in the next shot of B-roll, if I have the subject of the frame on the left side of the screen, that will all line up. Just stuff like small things like that I feel are important, but can often get overlooked.
So this week, Jacob also, as you always do, took some photos for us, and actually was a pretty long time staff photographer for us before he became multimedia director. So I also want to give you the opportunity to talk about kind of that as a part of your experience at the Equinox, as well as the photo that you took this week.
Yeah, well, this week I just took some photos for the Woodwind recital in the Red Fern. That was just concert being held in the alumni recital hall. So you can only really get so many photos when it comes to events like that. You're watching people on stage, but so I always try to use I usually go for, I have my standard lens, which I can get like wide shots with, but I have a telescopic one that can give a little bit of zoom, and I always try to use those ones because like when you think about how these images are going to turn out in an article, you always think like, oh, you want like a big subject to be the frame of the picture. So I always care a lot about that. And I always care a lot about trying to get a variety of shots, so who's ever looking over them later on will have some freedom with what they want to, however they want the article to look.
But so your work previously as a photographer, I'm curious to hear you like talk about how that experience was, and then sort of the experience of then shifting into, because it's different. Like there's definitely overlap, but going from like, taking a couple photos, photo assignments every week versus now like being on the e-board and trying to do videos weekly and Noxcast and sort of that bigger package of work.
Yeah, no, I mean it's definitely a shift. I think more than anything, doing photos for the Equinox and then now doing multimedia has just exposed me to like so much that's going on campus. I probably wouldn't know most of these things are going on if I wasn't taking these photo or video assignments. One thing I've learned is you have to think about it how it's going to turn out in the editing process. You have to think about how these shots are going to go together, and I definitely think just imagining where this piece of footage or this photo is going to eventually end up is a crucial part of the process.
Yeah. And I think like with your work in like photography, like I saw you early on as like a staff photographer, but I've been really happy to see sort of like some branching out in terms of like used to be like mainly just like, you know, building shots and stuff, which we always need those, but also seeing you take on some like featurey photos of like students. One in particular, like the band Splatter, I remember that you took. You took a photo of Octavio Brito, and also sort of branching out into shots. Like I don't know, there's like one recently that was like we had an article about like the spring, just sort of students' feelings about that coming up, and like those like up close shots of like the plants that sort of like demonstrate spring. I don't know, it's like a simple thing like that, but it's like a really cool way to depict it. And I think there's like a lot of mindset that sort of goes into like what visual can like best represent something that's sort of like a anamorphous like idea that we have sometimes, where it's like it's not just like go to this place, take a picture. It's like, you know, how best can you like capture this like feeling? How best can you capture like the sort of like vibe of certain people? And so yeah, I think it's really interesting. Just like the visuals that really connect to the article and help put everything together on a weekly basis.
Yeah, I definitely think when it came to that spring article, I remember it was like spring is coming up and how students feel about that, and I needed to get a photo that represented spring. I'm like, okay, I'll go outside, I'll get like some nice grass or some nice trees, some nice foliage, and everything's still dead. It's like March, and so it was just I was able to find like a little small patches of green outside the Elliott Center, and that's what I used.
Yeah, I don't know. I think like Nate said, in terms of like style wise, something like that, you know, the perspective on those photos is something that's like technically simple, but I think that it's kind of it's a matter of like taking the extra step to be like, no, I'm gonna find some sprouts and I'm gonna, you know, get like the level shot of them and add that kind of just perspective and style to make them kind of, I don't know, just like pop off the page. But yeah, no, I loved those. I remember we were like cooking on layout and I was like, damn, who took these? And it was like Jacob, and I was like, yeah. All right, with that, let's go ahead and jump into the proper top stories from this week. A pretty exciting one, just like for us, from news this week, which is that James Rinker, KSC alum, as well as the former education and business reporter at the Keene Sentinel, has now taken on a new position here at the college as an educational counselor for Upward Bound. This is kind of just like cool to see. We've met James a couple times, like here and there, in passing, at least for me mostly. But I don't know. It's cool. You know, it's clear he's a super just like passionate guy, and it's cool. You know, I'm interested to see, you know, what kind of work he ends up doing for Upward Bound, and definitely, you know, I think it's good news for the whole community that he's still just here and you know, working on stuff that he cares about.
Yeah, I interviewed him once before when Sentinel launched their free subscriptions for students program. He visited our multimedia public affairs reporting class earlier this semester, and just every experience I've had with him has been just such like a nice one. He's such like a personable guy. He's very like rooted in the community, which I think is like all those are like such good qualities to have as a journalist. And I feel like that also really does lend itself to the new position of, you know, being an educational counselor at Upward Bound. I think, you know, he's clearly really passionate about the education space. And, you know, while it is, you know, sad from one point of view to see, you know, because he did such a great job reporting at the Sentinel, staying in the community, and it'll be good to see him around campus. And I think it's a great addition.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really have much to add to that story. I'm sorry.
That's fine.
It's okay.
One thing that I did take note of from the article, which shout out to Nicole being top story, but the fact that he was like, yeah, I'm here to do the job that I'm hired for, but also I'm open to just like talk to anybody who has like questions about journalism or wants to learn more. So I think that that's like potentially a cool resource in sort of the immediate KSC community now for people who are, again, still kind of operating in the space that we're in now, as sort of, coming up as fresh journalists, being able to have somebody around who just one more person who's able to speak to the experience of doing that professionally and like Nate said, doing some really great work in the process. So yeah, super cool to have him. All right, our region and state top story this week comes from the Keene Sentinel, actually, and is about more budget cuts. I do feel like it gets to a point where there's only so much we can really say about just the constant cuts. But so, this is cuts coming down from the State House, and, we're looking at cuts to the arts and protection for children, and of course more job cuts. I really I want to provide some more just like meaningful commentary to this, but I do just genuinely get to a point where I don't know what else to say. I guess if I were to add anything, I did take note of the fact that the state's Office of the Child Advocate, it's called, is on the chopping block, which Governor Ayotte has opposed that cut, is my understanding. But just the fact that that's even in the conversation right now while we're looking at one of the biggest like class action lawsuits that I can ever think of seeing in my life, regarding the Sununu Youth Center and just the situation there. I think that that's really hard to stomach, the fact that in the face of an issue like that, we're still looking at the issue of support for children and saying, yeah, maybe we could get away with not having that.
Yeah. I think it's just like the issue of government waste is so like severely overstated, at least on the state level. I think in the federal level, there's probably things to find, like we've mentioned before in our editorial, like in the Department of Defense in particular. But when you're talking about like the state level, where we already spend so little on the programs that we should be supporting more, or at least keeping at stagnant funding levels for the time being. I think it's sort of just misguided, and clearly it's from the legislator's point of view, you're looking at just like line items, but you're not knowing the story behind that or who it impacts or who it affects. It's sort of just can we get away with this sort of thing is how I think of it. And I think that there just needs to be a lot more care in the process, but rather than just a strict financial, this will save us however much money, so get rid of it, because it doesn't seem at all from like any of these recent stories about budget cuts that people who are legislators at these levels are putting that care into it. And I think Governor Ayotte's budget isn't ideal either, but it was a lot more moderated. And I think, if that's like the best case scenario of what we're going to get, I feel like they should just go ahead and pass her budget. I feel like there's no use in making it worse and cutting things even more than we're already facing with that. So, yeah, that's what I got to say.
Yeah, I mean, I've been hearing all about these budget cuts, and it really does seem like what you said, like line items and people not really saying like, "Oh, can we get away with this? Can we?" Without fully like not knowing the people that it's impacting, and it's sad to see.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a lack of like when you don't have to look at the faces of the people that this is going to have such a huge and direct impact on, it can be a lot easier to say, yeah, I mean, who who's going to notice, or they just need to tighten their belts even more. And it's like, there are some things that just matter, and deserve to be funded because they are doing things that matter. And so, yeah, I mean, I would agree with what Nate said as well, of like, if they're going to be looking at this budget that the governor has proposed, I don't see the need to then, go in and continue to try and just like claw it down. I feel like, we have already this proposed budget that is, I think, reasonably moderate. And so I don't know what else you could ask for, really. Our student life top story this week is a profile on somebody who actually also works with us in sort of the student org, like media org space. It's Ryan Ritigliano, who is a senior and the outgoing general manager of WKNH Radio. Ryan is kind of a unique case as well because, he's the general manager of WKNH, but also a lot of his work is focused on what he does for EcoReps and the sustainability office. And I know that he's done some work with the Harris Center as well. And so kind of, two very different worlds, but I feel like he's sort of found the meeting point of those things. I know that, like the whole EcoReps e-board does a show like every week on WKNH. But yeah, I think, being able to find the meeting point of two passions that you have is something that I'll always commend anyone for. That's something that I am always trying to do, is find kind of the meeting point between everything that I'm passionate about in my life. And that's why like journalism has been such a great fit for me, because you have the opportunity to kind of like just explore anything, because there's always going to be something in that topic that's worth covering. And so I think, I would guess that it's a similar deal for Ryan, where, I mean, you're working in the media space, but there's no reason why you can't bring, the cause of environmentalism. And one thing that he mentioned specifically is like climate change awareness. There's no reason why you can't bring that topic wholesale into the booth of the radio station and broadcast your thoughts and research or whatever it may be about that to the campus at large, and hopefully kind of let them know what's going on in that space.
Yeah, the profile focuses more on the environmental side of things, but I definitely think the intersection there is really important. And I feel like, it would be something that would be cool to see for other leaders of orgs to do, and things to really use WKNH as sort of an additional platform, because they are in that media space. And I feel like a lot of it, rightfully so, is focused on music, but I also do appreciate like talk radio aspect of things as well. And having shows where you can mix the two as well. It is also like sort of pegged, though, to the fact that Ryan Ritigliano's show Graffiti Gospel is about to have its 100th episode soon, which is no small feat. Doing your show 100 times, week by week. So we always hear that during layout nights. It's on 10 to 12 on Tuesdays, and we're always there a little bit late. So I'm sure we'll be tuning in to see what he's got going on there. But he's definitely a big leader in the WKNH realm, but then also in environmental studies, and sort of an example of like a student. And that also ties in with his academics. So it's like leader in involvement, but then also in that academic space. It's really interesting stuff to see.
I didn't know that how heavily involved Ryan was with EcoReps, but that I haven't been, I'm usually not there that late on the Tuesday night, so I haven't really heard much of his show. But it's great that he's able to use the outlet of WKNH radio broadcasting to spread awareness for those issues.
Yeah, definitely. I actually wonder, we don't know for sure, but I wonder if he's got anything like specifically planned for the 100th show. Again, I'm sure we'll find out.
Yeah.
But Yeah, no, just cool to see somebody kind of, again, like hit that mark of achievement and being able to really make an impact on the space that they occupy on campus. And it was cool to hear from some people in his life about the impact that he's had on them and as on the community as a whole. So congrats, and yeah. Our editorial this week, we went back and forth quite a bit about what we were going to do editorial about this week, because there's so much going on in the news, but it's also, like with the budget cuts thing, for example, it's hard to not feel like we're sort of retreading ground. And we did do the editorial a couple weeks ago about Mahmoud Khalil, the Columbia graduate, and that definitely hits on a lot of the same issues and points as this topic, the Tufts University student who was detained by Homeland Security agents. But I think at the end of the day, we just kind of figured that this is so directly related not only to what's on everyone's minds, but also to the work that we're doing on a weekly basis, because the supposed crime here was publishing an op-ed in the student paper. And one of the points we hit on in the editorial, and I think it rings perfectly true, is we're doing that every week. And it's scary to think that as students, we're at risk of this type of treatment, of being plucked off the street with no warning, no reason to suspect that there would be this kind of problem. And, one of the details as well, she was on the way to meet with friends to break the fast for Ramadan. And I think that just really, it illustrates the fact that, you can be living your life and going about your daily business as a private citizen, and there was no harm, there's no violence, there's no excuse for this type of treatment, because I fail to see what tangible violence is being caused by publishing an op-ed that peacefully and respectfully dissents with the response from the university regarding the situation in Palestine. And so we did receive news that the student has now been released from detention. And so some of the points in the editorial may not ring as being as timely as they were when we originally wrote it. But I still, I don't want to speak for the entire board because that's the point of the editorial. But for me, at least, I still think that, our point remains true, that this is a disgusting abandonment of human decency on the part of the current presidential administration and those working under it. And this has to stop. This can't happen to more people.
Yeah, I always said like a threat to media anywhere is a threat to media everywhere, and someone who, publish an op-ed, and we look so hard at trying to find that like diversity of opinion and diversity of voice in our line of work, to think that, if there was an international student who wanted to write a similar op-ed for us, and to think that a similar thing could happen to them. We just recently we're having an opinion going in the paper next week about the situation where in Peterborough there was some folks that were taken away by immigration agents. So I feel like it's really hard to sort of grapple with that and trying to advance our mission and trying to make sure everyone's voices are heard. And we try to provide a platform and a forum for people to articulate that. As we say with like civic engagement, there's always protest, but I think we do our part in having giving that voice to students and allowing them, and it's not something that we would ever back down from. I feel like we're always going to continue what we do, and regardless of threat. I think that's what's important, is not backing down, making everyone's voice heard. And I think saying the names of these people where this is happening, even after she's been released. I mean, I don't think this will be the first and only instance. As you can see already, this is sort of the second of its kind, and sort of a prominent instance of someone who spoke up in support of Palestine, who this happens to. So making sure that everyone knows their name, their story. And I think in the age of sort of the internet and things that go around social media, that it makes it a little bit harder for the government to get away with things like this. So I think it's just, we have to keep the pressure on.
Definitely. I definitely agree with everything you guys have said. Attack on media outlets, attack on all media outlets. And, it's just, it's sad to see. It's crazy that, like, someone publishing their opinion on a current conflict should be encouraged. That should be allowed, and there's no excuse for what happened there.
Yeah, and I mean, I think as anecdotal as it can get, with an instance like this, I referenced for the editorial, I primarily referenced the Associated Press coverage when I was sort of giving everybody the rundown of the details prior to our discussion. And there were some quotes in there from people who know this student, who know Rumeysa Ozturk, and talking about just how, I mean, it can be interesting to hear talk about, like, somebody that you don't know, and they're describing the fact that she couldn't hurt a fly and all this. But I think the main point is just that all of us who are working in this press space and using our voices are just people. We're all just, like, ordinary people who care about getting the word out about these important topics and issues. And the only semblance of justification that I've seen from this administration for this type of behavior is that people who speak out on these issues are aligning themselves with Hamas. And again, I'm retreading points from the editorial we did a couple weeks ago, but I fail to see where anything contained in that op-ed, anything contained within the position that essentially boils down to, I don't want my university to be complicit in these atrocities that are happening halfway across the world. I see no reason for that to be acceptable. Where does Hamas come into that picture? And so, again, I think we're very glad that she is hopefully able to return to her life with some semblance of normalcy. But I'm certain that the damage this has inflicted, it doesn't just evaporate. The trauma and the fear, and it can't continue. It was a difficult editorial discussion for sure. But we will now move on to something a little lighter from arts and entertainment, which is that the Colonial Theater downtown had a pretty big name swing by. Leslie Jones from Saturday Night Live and The Daily Show, actor and comedian, kind of does it all, was there as part of a larger New England tour. And this is the kind of thing, again, I was arts and entertainment editor for some time last year. And that's the kind of thing where it's not on campus, but you just you see the fact that someone of this level of fame is coming to town, and we just kind of say, well, we got to have somebody there. And so shout out to senior reporter Ryan, as always, for being there and getting the scoop. But yeah, I think it was super cool to hear from some community members who are fans and maybe didn't expect that they would be able to have the chance to see Jones perform, and then next thing you know, she's right downtown.
Yeah, I think it's always cool when some big names can stop by Keene. I think despite being a small community, it's a very engaged community. And sometimes when you have someone who's on a tour, whether it be like an actor, comedian, or, musical act, there's nearest place to us is Manchester. That's sort of a big city. That's a little bit of a drive, but then besides that, often you'll have to go to like Boston to see a lot of big names. So anytime that sort of the Colonial can get someone to come that is at the caliber that Leslie Jones is at, I think really you can just see by like the numbers and by how many people show up that it's something that the community wants to see and is definitely actively engaged in. So yeah, really good coverage. Got some good quotes from the audience about the act and really good stuff.
Yeah, Keene is like you said, it's a small community, but it is a very engaged community, and it takes you don't really hear about a lot of big names coming here. You only hear like, oh, Boston or somewhere else, but it's nice to be able to have something like that on just a 5-minute walk from campus.
Definitely. And one thing that I appreciated about this as well, we talk about sort of the angle of being a campus paper, but then also looking to things that we think would be of interest in the larger community. But, Ryan also spoke with the director. I'm not sure on the title. Ryan also spoke with the director of the Colonial, who mentioned that, the Colonial does get some big names coming through sometimes, but just overall in their programming, it seems like one of their goals is definitely to engage the student population here and really kind of entice them to come out and see what they have to offer. And so I don't know. I always think that that's nice. When a community space is thinking of us and willing to try and when they're planning their programming, think, well, what might get some students out here? What might get them engaged in the community at large? And so obviously that's nice for them to have people coming to their events, but then it's also nice for students to kind of have a way to just get more involved in the community at large rather than just kind of, planting yourself on campus all the time. For our top sports story this week, this is a big one because field hockey coach Amy Watson has been with the program for quite some time and is rapidly approaching her, I think, 500th win with the program, which is crazy. That is not something that you just do without years of dedication and passion and really just focus. She will be in it for this one last year and then is retiring. And I think that it's really, I think it's bittersweet for a lot of people, because on one hand, it's such a legacy to leave behind. And it's clear from everybody that spoke about her that, there's such a fondness and just appreciation for the work that she's dedicated to the program. But at the same time, of course, lots of people are sad to see her go. But I thought this was such a nice way to kind of take a look at the work that she's done. And I thought that senior reporter Elias did a really great job with just getting that input and talking about why it's such a monumental thing. And certainly we'll be looking ahead, when that 500th win happens, we'll be there as well.
Yeah, there's been like some churn at like the helms of various athletic programs recent years, but I feel like this is probably one of the biggest losses in some ways in terms of the fact that she was not only involved in just being the head coach of that program, but then also in athletics administration, particularly looking to advance women's involvement in sports. And I think it was really touching to also see that, she feels like she made a good impact in that area as well, sort of, going in and how things were when she went in, and then going out and seeing that, things are good now and you made an impact. But then also with the program and the countless amounts of alums that attended the program and were under her leadership as a coach and helping them grow. And, collegiate sports, it's just such a big part of the college experience for so many. And having a good coach adds so much to that. And I definitely think, it's sort of bittersweet. It'll be, that 500th win will be sort of the capstone accomplishment in her long career. But then, the question is always going to be, who will be the next up and sort of the switching of hands of leading the program. I'm sure that athletics will look very carefully in who they pick. It's a very important job, sort of, leading the coaching staff and then also leading your team to success. And with that team, it's such a successful one. So I'm confident that they'll continue doing well no matter what. And congratulations to Coach Watson for when that milestone does come, because it's gonna come pretty soon.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really have anything to add to the story. It seems like someone was able to make a large impact and now they're leaving. But hopefully the future brings someone else somewhere near as talented.
Yeah, I'm sure, like Nate says, that position will be handled very carefully. And I do think that just in general, across the board, it seems like our athletes are lucky to have a lot of really strong women's sports programs. I certainly think that athletics will handle that position carefully. And I think across the board, the athletes that we have at Keene State seem to benefit from some really strong women's sports programs. And certainly that is due to the contributions of Coach Watson in no small part. And so, yeah, I think that, she certainly deserves to be commended for her work, specifically in the advancement of that and really kind of showing that there is a space for women to be active in the athletic sphere. And, we continue to prove as a college that, the women athletes we have here are real contenders. And so, I don't doubt that looking ahead to the future, there's more success to be had. So best of luck to everyone and congrats. All right. I think that will do it for this week's news recap. Thank you so much, as always, for watching or listening to Noxcast. We will be back again next week with another news recap for you. As always, I'd like to thank the composer of the music for Noxcast, our very own Equinox alum, Zach Keenan, as well as the designer of the graphic for Noxcast, our very own art director, Elijah Fisher, and, of course, the editor of Noxcast and our very own guest here, Multimedia Director Jakob Hall. So, thanks. We'll see you next week. Until then, I've been Charlotte King.
And I've been Nathan Hope. And thanks again to Jacob for joining us.
Thanks for having me.